That was odd.
Fuck was that? Yes.
All right. We are live on Facebook, live on YouTube. Welcome, everybody. I'm Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. This is going to be episode 581 in just a minute of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. We're just getting everything set up and ready to work here. I need to social ticker and... No, I don't want that. I want Second Amendment Foundation find posts. And turn it on. Here we go. All right. On my end, folks, I'm ready to start recording, and we've already got comments coming in. Awesome. So, where am I getting that really loud? That went away. I don't know. I had some really loud something or another.
Mm-hmm. As soon as you identify it, it goes away. As soon as you recognize it. Oh, and there's a feedback.
I hear Amanda has an echo. I have an echo.
I don't hear it, folks.
Charlie, are you using your set or are you using a mic? Speakers.
I've got little headsets in.
Okay.
All right.
And I didn't hear anyone echoing.
Neither did I.
Can you deal with the echo?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. In that case, I'm going to hit the record button, and we are going in 5, 4, 3.
Hey gang, this is Masad Ayub from the Pro Arms Podcast. I'm here to remind you that our podcast is a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network, and I'm going to suggest you do what we do and check out the other podcasts at selfdefenseradio.net.
Treat every firearm as if it's loaded.
Never point a firearm at anything you're not willing to kill or destroy.
Keep your finger off the trigger until you are on target and ready to fire.
Always be sure of your target and what lies beyond it.
And welcome to the Polite Society podcast, presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. We're recording this one on Monday, April the 5th, 2021. I'm Paul Lathrop. And somebody's supposed to say something after me. I think it was Amanda.
I'm so busy listening to whatever that feedback is. I don't know. Okay. I'm Amanda Suffolk, and on tonight's show, we're going to talk to Lauren Hartnett about being a firearms trainer and a Second Amendment activist in New York City.
I'm Tracy Thronberg, and we will talk about Iowa passing constitutional carry.
I'm John Richardson, and we'll talk about Delaware going the opposite route, working on a pistol purchase permit and a standard capacity magazine ban.
I'm Charlie Cook, and we have 2 home invasions to discuss in the DGU segment, so climb aboard.
Strap in.
And hang on.
Episode 581 of the Polite Society podcast starts right now. And welcome back. This is Monday, so it must be the Polite Society podcast. Rob's not here, so I can't throw to him like I normally do. Also, Tracy is here, and she's normally not here. It's been a while since we've seen her. We need to get her a red shirt, is what we need to do. But, John, we're going to start with you. What's been up with you since the last time we've been on the air, man?
Well, I took a couple of days off for Easter and enjoyed the grandchildren. They were real pleased with their Easter baskets. It didn't really warm up down here until Easter itself. In gun-related news, my son-in-law got his carry permit and bought a new M&P Shield Plus yesterday. And I'm also going to be shooting my first round of trap and taking part in an indoor USPSA-style fun shoot in the next couple of weeks. And it's actually due to a class requirement for my hunting and shooting sports management class. So I'll pass it on to Tracy, who had much more exciting stuff.
Well, I don't know about that. I recently attended the Range Master Tactical Conference where I worked as a range safety officer and came in second overall in the ladies division of the shooting match and third in the ladies shoot off. And Paul, I did it shooting a plastic gun.
Hey!
TacCon is always a great time with about 200 of your best friends and national self-defense instructors such as Tom Givens, Masad Ayub, Brian Hill, Scott Jedlinski, and a few dozen others. It was held at the Dallas Pistol Club in Carrollton, Texas, where it will be held again next year. It's always a great event. It sells out 6 months in advance. For more information, you can visit www.rangemaster.com and type in TacCon in the search engine for more information. Amanda, what's going on with you?
Well, since I was on here last, I've been at the Florida Carry event, which was pretty amazing. And then I went on to an 8-day aerospace audit for my work. And now I'm back to actually thinking about Second Amendment issues once again. So I'm headed to the Ohio House, rescheduled for the 4th time, to testify for the Ohio Second Amendment Sanctuary State. So that's my next kind of big thing. So, Charlie, how about you?
Well, it's been a while since I've been on. And since the Florida Carry event, I've filmed shows at the Second Amendment Foundation headquarters in Bellevue, Washington. I may have got to drive Alan Gottlieb's Corvette. I've had some home firearm safety classes and some Utah classes as well. And last week, I was up at the SIG Academy in Epping, New Hampshire, taking a modern sporting rifle. And I learned that I have some changes that I want to make to my AR. So, Paul, how about yourself?
Well, you can't drop a bomb like that and just leave it. So
No.
you're going up. You went up to Bellevue and you got to drive Alan Gottlieb's Corvette. I mean, were you stealing it? What was up with that?
Well, Alan is episode number 100 of Riding Shotgun with Charlie, and that is going to be coming out next Tuesday. I filmed 5 shows in Washington. I filmed 5 shows in Florida, and I've got a lot of episodes. So I'm actually doing something a little crazy, and I'm pushing my comfort zone a little bit. And I'm going to be putting out a show a week for the next 3 months or so until I can get caught up. And I'm still trying to interview people. I've got an interview this week with someone outside of Boston. I've got an instructor that I'm taking a class with later this month, and I'm going to interview him. And I'm going to try to get down to New Jersey to interview some people at the CNJFO DC Project event next month. So I'm on the go, man. I'm just trying to keep up. That's all.
Very, very cool.
Keep up.
And
That's
then,
it.
and what changes do you want to make to your AR, dude?
So I have, I only have one sling on my AR. I guess I've never really found the need to have a sling on it until I took this class. And I think we used the 6 Hour M400s, which were pretty cool. And I liked having the, I think they had an M-lock rail. I really don't know much about rails, but I just have a traditional 4-end grip on mine that I think is about 6 inches long. And I want to replace that with a rail that goes all the way around the barrel that's a little bit longer. I want to make my AR look cooler. I do have an Ace stock on mine, one of the skeleton stocks, and I don't know if I want to change that out, but I have seen that they have some that have some slings on them, but mine does not have a place to put the sling on it, or the sling attachment. So that's the changes I'd like to make.
I got to tell you, man, I've got the quad rail on mine, and I absolutely love it. And one accessory you really got to look into is the burrito holder and warmer. I mean, it's
I think I saw one of those in the USA Today article, right? They had one of those there?
all right.
You need a 2-point sling on your rifle, Charlie. It'll make your life a whole lot more better.
You know, when I got my AR, I piecemealed it together and had a friend help me put all the guts in it. And I really didn't know what I was looking for until I took a class. And I took a class before I had the AR. Yeah, I took a class before I had it, and then I had it, and I've had it for whatever, a while now. And I took this class up at SIG, and I'm like, all right, I think I need to make some changes. So it was nice to get that education.
I had Chris Serino paracord my sling onto my rifle because there was not a place to affix it on the front. So I've got it. Mine's really classy looking. A little bit of paracord, a couple knots.
But it works, doesn't it? It works.
Oh, you betcha.
Oh, that you're talking about that pink and white one, right?
The pink and white one, right?
Yes, and now I have to go find a pink sling because it just
right. You got to. Yeah. What color's the paracord?
Beige.
Oh, see,
get
totally
pink paracord.
Look, I'm not a fashionista, but I think that breaks the rules.
I think it does. I think it breaks a lot of rules.
All right. Well, that kind of leaves me. I want to welcome CNJFO as an official sponsor of the Polite Society podcast starting this evening. You'll be hearing their ad in just a little bit. I am just pleased as punch that the Coalition of New Jersey Firearms Owners has come on board and has sponsored this show for a year. I really believe in what they're doing, and I really am thankful that they've come on board as sponsors. I want to thank Teresa Einecker, Rosie, the whole John Petrolino, the whole gang over at CNJFO. They are first-class people, and you'll hear their ad in a minute, but I just want to let you know that if you live in a free state like South Dakota or any of the now 20 constitutional carry states and you don't have that much worry about local gun rights, support CNJFO. They're fighting the good fight in New Jersey. Also, John Petrolino and we'll get to your comments here in a bit. I usually get those rolling here in just a little bit, and we've already got a ton of them. We've got over 40 already, but I'll get to them in just a bit. But John Petrolino wrote up the Florida Carry event for AmmoLand, and that just broke today. I'll include that in the comments both on YouTube and Facebook when I get a few minutes to put them in there. And a personal story here. Susan really got me excited here a little bit ago. She says, because there's in our neighborhood, there's a big empty lot, and there used to be a sawmill, and back in the 40s and 50s, and it's just been an empty lot for a long time. They've been clearing the lot, and she's looking on her phone, and she goes, "Oh, Siteworks is going in there." And I'm thinking to myself, Siteworks, S-I-T-E. Yeah, it's Siteworks, all right, but it's not rifle and pistol sights. It's Siteworks construction equipment. So that's what's going on with me. Let's see here. I want to talk about training classes very briefly. We've got a Mag 40 coming up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, June 3rd through the 6th. Tracy's going to be there. Amanda's going to be there. I'm trying to talk Charlie into being there. But we need you there too. If you're interested in taking a Mag 40 class, let's face it, folks, Mass is not going to be doing these forever. There's a limited number going forward. If you're interested in taking one this year, contact Susan at politicsandguns.com. Let's do this then. I gotta move over here, click this, and talk about Self-Defense Radio Network. As you can see, all your pro-freedom podcasts in one place. We're there. Self-Defense Gun Stories, Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns. All kinds of great shows on the network. As you can see, 15 and counting. If you are looking for a pro-gun podcast that fits your taste, you're going to find it there. Check it out at sdrn.us. I think we're going to go ahead and jump to break. When we come back, we're going to have our guest who's patiently waiting for us, Lauren Hartnett. She's going to be talking about being a firearms trainer and a Second Amendment advocate really behind enemy lines in New York City. Hang on, folks. We'll be right back right after this.
New Jersey is a civil rights wasteland where an unconstitutional law known as justifiable need keeps ordinary citizens from exercising their right to bear arms. New Jersey spits in the eye of freedom, ignores the Bill of Rights and the Heller decision. New Jersey politics are an anti-civil rights bulldozer and a spreading cancer. The Coalition of New Jersey Firearms Owners, a tax-exempt nonprofit, has a goal to defeat justifiable need, reverse course on all anti-freedom laws, and render aid to other jurisdictions by filing Supreme Court-bound litigation. CNJFO is a beacon of freedom behind the Iron Curtain in New Jersey. Join CNJFO's strong, enthusiastic patriots. Support the Coalition of New Jersey Firearms Owners today. Protect all our rights and return freedom to the Garden State. To donate or learn more, go to cnjfo.com.
And welcome back. This is the interview segment of the Polite Society podcast, presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining us today, Lauren Hartnett. Lauren, you are Athena Defense in New York City. You're also a member of the DC Project. I've seen you speak at Gun Rights Policy Conference. You're a bit of everywhere. Welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's get started. How does one... we all know getting a gun in New York City is a challenge. Carrying a gun in New York City is nearly impossible. It's got to be just about as impossible to be a firearms trainer in New York City. What do you have to do to train somebody to use a firearm in New York City?
So, aside from the rest that every other instructor pretty much throughout the country has to go through, getting credentials, getting certifications, and then getting that credibility, that is pretty much standard. Where my biggest hurdle lies is I'm not allowed to teach anybody, and this is also the rest of New York State, but in New York City it's a little bit more difficult, but we're not allowed to teach anybody pistol shooting unless they have a pistol permit. And that sounds, okay, well, go and apply for one, except in New York City, even before COVID, it was taking about 6 to 9 months to get a pistol permit, and now because of COVID they're backed up about 18 to 20 months. So if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I want to learn how to shoot a pistol, my first question is always, well, do you have your permit? If not, we can go through some basic stuff. I could do stuff with simulation training and laser gun training and all those other tools for dry firing. However, I cannot use a live pistol. So then usually once they hear that, it's like, oh, well, how do I do that? And then when I explain to them the process, it tends to deter a lot of people. So my biggest feat is always trying to keep them engaged, keep them interested, and then keep them wanting to apply for their permit. So it's kind of a twofold where, yes, I can begin to train people in the city and I could start teaching them firearm safety, but at the same time, I'm pushing for more people to apply for their permits in the city. And then, of course, finding a range
Yes.
We're very limited with the ranges.
So let me see if I've got
facilities.
Let me see if I've got this straight. In order to have a pistol in New York City, you have to have a permit, and you have to go through training to get that permit. Is that right? No. Okay.
No.
Because I was going to say, first you have to have the permit, but you got to have the permit to get trained. It just sounded like a catch-22 to me.
Right. Well, what's interesting is when you apply for your permit, once you go through the whole process and you pay a ton of money and then you get approved, they tell you have 30 days to now go buy a pistol. Here's your purchase order, because we in New York City have, in order for us I can't just go to the store and go buy a gun. I have to ask New York City for permission first. Even if I have my permit, I still have to ask for permission, request a purchase order, take that to an FFL, and then I could purchase a gun. And even the purchase orders are backed up about 6 months. So once you get your purchase order, after you initially applied for your permit, you have 30 days to buy a gun. Otherwise, your permit's now void, and you have to go through the whole process all over again. and pay for it all over again. So now you have somebody who's completely inexperienced, knows absolutely nothing about firearms, and you're telling them you have 30 days to go buy one.
Wow.
So to me, it just doesn't make sense.
I want to get one
question.
Give me one second. I want to get, before it goes away, I want to get a social media comment in here. Lauren, you're also an EMT, and gun websites, Pete over at gun websites asked for Lauren, are there any orgs or projects focused on guns and EMS, like advocating for carry opportunity for EMS, such as Faster Saves Live does for educators?
So not in New York City specifically, and it's a topic that's been very heavily debated within the EMS community, because we're pretty much, I would say that we're about 50-50 on it, with EMS providers pro carrying on duty versus not carrying on duty. And the way that I've always approached it is, if you live in a state that allows you to conceal carry and you have your concealed carry permit, that right should transfer over to your workplace. And we know that there are a lot of workplaces that don't allow concealed carry. However, with EMS, it's drastic. I've waited 45 minutes for police to come when I was in a situation where I needed police while I was at work. So it does get very frustrating. But in New York City, the first thing that they would have to do is allow civilians to carry a firearm, which they don't. So that would actually have to be the first step, because they won't give us the status that's needed in order to conceal carry.
All right,
or carry in general.
I'm going to open this up to my staff then.
Could I lead off questions?
Absolutely.
So, New York City gives you a purchase order number, Lauren, that is valid for 30 days, if I understand you correctly. Are you required to purchase the gun within the city limits of New York City, or do you have the ability to purchase it from an FFL somewhere not within New York City limits?
We can go anywhere to get it. A lot of the issues that I have found is some of the major chains won't sell if you have a New York City permit, regardless that you have a permit and a purchase order. In New Jersey, you need a firearms ID card. So you would have to get that from New Jersey first to be allowed to buy and purchase a firearm through New Jersey. But I can get one online. Like if I found something online, I could have it transferred to an FFL, bring my purchase order and my permit, and then retrieve it from the FFL in New York City. Usually that's what I do, because we're also very limited on gun stores in the lower New York area and FFLs in general. Like Staten Island currently only has one, so it makes it really difficult and expensive.
Yeah.
So.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Go ahead.
Okay, so if
Amanda,
you told me to go ahead.
Amanda,
I know you told me to go ahead.
Then you set it up. Okay, so Lauren, if you want to buy a gun, you have to have the pistol purchase permit. Can you do sort of like what we in Ohio do, which is kind of go in, put your gun on layaway, pay for it 90% of the way, then get your pistol purchase permit and retrieve it, finalize the deal so that you're sure it's still there when you want it?
Yeah, so that's what I did when I bought my first gun, but I also knew the FFL. I had worked with him before, so it was kind of like, hey, his name was Paul, so I was like, hey, Paul, I'm waiting on my permit. I should have it within the next couple of weeks or so, but this is the gun I want, so would you be able to order it for me so that way when I get my purchase order, I'll have it, it'll be ready. And he's like, yeah, sure, no problem. So it does depend on the FFL that you're dealing with, but there's nothing that says that you can't do it. Mm-hmm. So that's what I usually tell people too. And one of the things I do is I will take them over to a range in New Jersey where you can rent firearms, and I'll pull a couple, I'll suggest a couple of firearms to rent so that they can try out different ones, which is basically what I feel like a lot of instructors do to begin with. Have them try out different ones and say, that way when you're ready and you have your purchase order in hand and your permit in hand, you know what you want to buy, and you can make an educated decision on that. Charlie.
No. I was just going to say, if they don't have some sort of a plan like this, they're not going to have a chance to I call it fondling the hardware. They're not going to know what they like, what fits in their hand, what feels good, if you can't let them handle a gun before they purchase one. And the other thing is, this is exactly what the anti-gun folks want us to do. They want to make it expensive and difficult and timely and darn near impossible for someone to get a gun. And this is, I mean, obviously it works in the big cities like New York City and Chicago and the whole state of California, the whole state of New Jersey.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I've had a lot of people tell me, well, it's too expensive, it's too time consuming, so I'm just not going to do it. And I'm like, well, I don't think that that's the correct answer. We could make it a little less painful, and you could still make an educated decision, and I could help guide you through the entire process, which then tends to draw people back in a little bit more. But I just want people to be educated, and I'm trying to work around the systems that New York City's put in place. It is just very difficult and time-consuming.
With the run on guns in the last year, has it made it even more difficult for a person to be able to find what they want? I mean, I've heard about dealers that, let's say, they have 5 Canics or 5 something from Turkey, and they were asked, why do you have that? It's the only ones we could get. So with the scarcity and with the run on guns, does it make it even harder?
Yes, and I think it's always been difficult here, and then with just the scarcity on guns itself, it's been incredibly difficult. During COVID, I had a friend come up to me and was like, I want to buy a shotgun. I called about 6 to 8 different firearms dealers in Long Island, which is not part of the city, but kind of part of the city, but not really. Depends on who you ask. But none of them had it, and they're like, well, we're maybe in a month or 2. So it's definitely made it increasingly difficult.
So, Lauren, when you talk about the price of the pistol purchase permit or the purchase order thing, what's the overall cost? What is New York socking you with as you go to do this?
So the purchase order is free. They give you that little caveat, but they throw you that bone. However, the pistol permit itself is $340, and then you have to pay the federal fingerprinting fee, which is around $85. And then every 3 years, you have to renew your permit, which is $340 every year. Every 3 years, I'm sorry. So not only do we need permits for pistols, though, we also need them for long guns. So those are $140 with the same fingerprinting fee. So if you apply for both of them together at the same time, they let you only pay 1 fingerprinting fee and not 2, so you could save $85 if you do them both at one time. But it's also the same thing. You need a purchase order in order to buy a long gun as well.
We have been just getting oodles of social media comments, and I am sorry, folks. We've had over 50 now, and I'm not going to be able to get all of them up. It's just
hit the highlights.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna grab a few, and we may discuss them on the air. We may not. But Lauren, I wanna talk to you about something a little bit different, and we're coming up on the end of the hour, so or the end of the half hour. We may have to carry this over to the next segment as well. But I wanted to bring this in as well. You are wearing an educate, not legislate sweatshirt. Something I'm very familiar with, as I carried a couple hundred of them across the country. But that's DC Project, and you are, if I'm right, you're the New York coordinator of the DC Project, right?
Yes.
Okay, so tell us how you got involved with DC Project and a little bit about what they do.
So when I first applied for my permit and was appalled at the process, like most other New Yorkers are, I started, the way that my mind works is, well, this doesn't seem right, so there has to be a way to fix it. And I'm sure somebody has already started to try to fix it, but let me find out. So I started researching gun advocacy groups that, were dealing in the New York area. And I came across a couple, and I surprisingly didn't get a lot of positive responses from them. Even though I was offering assistance or asking questions about where we stood with certain lawsuits or just on certain issues, I wasn't getting positive responses. And then I ended up coming across the DC project. And it was, they were, I believe, in there. They were still in their first year, so it was still very, very new concept and a very new organization. And I reached out to Gabby Franco, who I had known prior, and started asking her questions about it. And she had put me in touch with Amanda. So then I get a phone call from Amanda, and she kind of gives me the whole rundown, and then also a low-key interrogation, as I called it, because I was just like, I don't know who this woman is calling me, but she's calling me, and we're talking, and I guess she gave me the clear go-to that I was able to then speak with Diana. So she told me, all right, well, we're going to DC in this date, and can you make it? Because we don't have a New York rep this year. So I was like, well, my friend's wedding is that week. But you know what? Yeah, sure. So I drove down to D.C. and then stayed for the duration of the week, all through the rally, drove home the night of the rally, and then the next morning I had a flight to Jamaica for a wedding. So I think I drove straight through the night, unpacked, repacked, and then got on a plane to go to Jamaica, but which has now been my life since. I feel like is what I've been constantly doing. But since then, it kind of just took off, and I fell in love with the organization, with what the DC Project stood for, and how we go about doing what we do. And then, of course, as Amanda calls it, it's Big Kids Summer Camp, because every time we're together, that's what it feels like. And we've just become such a close group of women and partners and friends, and just constantly pushing each other up. So it's being part of an organization that does such great things, because we're also great to each other. So it's kind of the best of both worlds with that.
We are a little bit late on break. I'm going to go ahead, if you don't mind, Lauren, I'm going to have you hang out for one more segment. And folks, we do need to step aside to break. We're going to hear from SAF, and we'll be right back right after this.
Your Second Amendment rights are under attack like no other time in history, and the Second Amendment Foundation needs you to take action now. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have pledged to make taking away your Second Amendment rights a top priority through gun bans, gun confiscation, government regulations, and even a gun tax. They have aligned themselves with anti-gun activists like billionaire Michael Bloomberg and appoint radicals like Beto O'Rourke as the anti-gun czar. The fight begins now with your text of Protect 2A to 474747. Text Protect 2A to 474747 to pledge your support and become a Second Amendment first responder. Your right to own a gun and protect your family are on the line. Text Protect 2A to 474747 and join the fight to protect your Second Amendment rights. Text Protect 2A to 474747 to pledge your support and become a Second Amendment first responder.
All right, welcome back to the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. And this is our second interview segment. We are still here with Lauren Hartnett. And Lauren, let's I want to take one more step into the EMT and for folks that don't know, I think we explained this earlier in the show. You are a EMT in New York City. You're a professional EMT. You're not a. I don't think New York has volunteers for EMTs, but I think they're all professionals. Now, you're a EMT, or are you a paramedic?
I'm a paramedic, and we actually do have volunteers, especially in the city. It's actually a big organization that we have in the city. They're not volunteers like the rest of the country, where it's funded by communities itself, mandated, if that makes sense. Like our taxes and stuff do go to the municipal agencies like the FDNY and stuff like that to support EMS. But we do have community-based volunteer EMS also. But I am a paramedic.
Okay, so I want to go back to the armed paramedics issue here for just a few minutes. You don't exactly, as a paramedic, just the same as a police officer, when you're going to a place, they're not having the best day in the world. You get to see people a little bit at their worst. And as a part of that, police are not dispatched every time you go to a call. If it's, I've fallen and I can't get up, I imagine the police don't necessarily have to go to that one. But I believe I interviewed you for the Daily Bullet a while back, and you told me at that point there were times where there were EMS crews that were called to a scene and intentionally misled as to why they were being dispatched to that scene, and then robbed when they got there. Yes. Is that something that, I mean, how common is that?
So it wasn't really something that we thought. We knew that there's always dangers of our job whenever we're going into strangers' houses. I mean, of course, there's a risk factor to that. However, the string of what was happening in New York City, where we were having EMS crews called to respond to a fake call and then robbed at gunpoint, that wasn't something that traditionally has happened before that. However, the violence that has began happening or increasing on EMS has been a huge issue. And since we've spoken last, we just had another paramedic who was bitten in the face by a patient who was intoxicated and on drugs, and bitten in the face, not, like a tiny bite mark. She did have a chunk of her face ripped out by a patient. So wow. The increasing attacks and assaults on EMS are what's common, not so much the specifics or one specific thing that's happening. It's just the increased assault on paramedics and EMS and our EMTs and first responders.
Pete over at Gun Websites has a great comment. He says, "While the folks who drive narcotics and drugs any place, anytime they're called, you're going to be a target. You've got some drugs on board your rig, I would imagine, that people are going to want to get a hold of."
So I don't think that we've actually had any, not in recent times anyway, but that we've had any paramedics targeted because of the narcotics that we have. And I do hope that we keep it that way. A lot of times what we've found happens is the thing with a lot of medical emergencies and even mental health emergencies is that most of the time these people are not in their right mind, so they don't know what's happening. And there's no reasoning with them. So that's where the danger lies. If there's somebody who you can reason with, that's one thing. But if you have a patient whose sugar is low because they have diabetes, there's nothing you can do other than give them sugar or give them, a shot of D50 or give them something to drink that has sugar in it. There's nothing else that you're going to be able to do to reason with that person because their mind is just not functioning properly, not functioning the way that it should. And that's not necessarily their fault. So, and that's where our standpoint on it comes, because it's like, well, it's not this person's fault that they have diabetes and their sugar's not being controlled properly. Maybe they didn't get to the doctor. Maybe now their medication needs to be readjusted. And a lot of times that's happened. So I think that we're really good at fixing those kinds of situations and being able to handle those kinds of situations. But, when we had an intoxicated patient who was also high on drugs, who was completely not in her right frame of mind, who decided to bite a paramedic in the face, those types of situations, police should have been involved, but they weren't. And that's a whole other issue of what's going on in the city now with, decreasing the police's response to EMS jobs and mental health jobs. Because they do get dispatched to every job, but they're a low priority. So they won't necessarily come if something else is of a higher priority that they get called for.
I want to get a George Geller comment off social media in here. He says, that's a Joe Biden quote. I've fallen and I can't get up. I'm going to open this back up to my staff. Who has a topic they want to bring up?
Well, I actually have a question. Are you allowed to carry any sort of non-lethal self-defense tools such as pepper spray?
No, not while we're at work. Pepper spray is legal in New York City. However, it's not something that the department will allow us to carry. So we've been trying to work. I also work very closely with my union that represents all of the EMTs and paramedics for FDNY, and we've been trying to coordinate with the department and push for the department to give us some type of training, and even when we're training in self-defense situations, we never tell people your gun is going to be your first go-to, right? Like that's usually not what we teach. If we can get away, you win every single fight that you don't get into. So if we could give our EMTs and medics some training that is escalating like that, so train them to be able to get out of a situation, train them to be able to de-escalate the situation, and then in the worst case scenario, train them to be able to stay alive. That would be the ideal. I've looked and I've searched all different types of programs. I have yet to find one cookie cutter program that would cater to EMS because of the uniqueness of our job and the oaths that we have taken as medical providers and what we do as medical providers. It does contradict a lot of it. So trying to find a program where it's like it's going to still continue to put us first and then the patient is very difficult to find. But if anybody's got any ideas, please let me know.
Mm-hmm. So Lauren, is New York one of the places where they're working on trying to bring in more social workers, more defund the police, and bring in more of that kind of I don't know what you'd call it, public policing, but not really policing. What do you call it? But
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
okay.
We actually we are currently piloting a program along with mental health services to respond to mental health crises that are deemed nonviolent by a dispatcher, and that will consist of a social worker and an EMS crew. So it was something that we were told is happening whether we liked it or not. So you can either get on board with it, or we're going to do what we want anyway. So that was kind of the hand that we were dealt, and we obviously had to we figured at least if we have some say in it and we can jump on board, then at least we can at least still make sure that our EMTs and medics are safe, because that's where our priority lies as far as a union standpoint goes. But and they haven't rolled it out yet. They're still going through the training. So I'll be curious to see the self-defense aspect of it that they're training in, because that is a portion of the training, and I will hopefully be there for that. I'm cautiously optimistic.
I've got a question about the fingerprinting, if I could. Does the fingerprinting have to be done by a New York City police officer?
Yes, it has to be done at one police plaza by their pistol licensing bureau. Like, you can't just go to because it's electronic, and I think that they're not doing the actual ink one anymore. I think it's just the electronic one now. But yes, it has to be done up at one police plaza.
Gotcha, because I do the ink fingerprints for the Utah class, and if I could sneak down to New York City and charge people only $50 to fingerprint them, I could fund this class for the Mag 40 with no problem.
You know what?
Yeah,
in Texas, we pay $10 in Texas. $10 to be electronically fingerprinted for our carry permit, for anything that we have to have electronic fingerprints for.
Ours is included in our permit, and it's $50 for the whole kit and caboodle.
Want to get in a social media comment. Christina Maria says, why not give additional training to police for social behaviors? There's a novel thought.
So that's actually something that I've like been a huge proponent of. I think since everything, because we don't, but even still, like, we don't even get that much training on mental health crises. You know, our training is, these are the different types of mental health crises there are, and these are the type of different psychiatric disorders there are, and here are some of the side effects that could be happening during a crisis. But all I can do is sedate them and put them to sleep and transfer them to the hospital that way. That's realistically all I could do. So, I mean, in some of these situations, there's just not, I don't think that there's 100% clear-cut answer.
All right.
In Austin, we have a program where Austin Police Department officers can undergo additional training for mental health calls, and the officers get a monthly stipend, bonus or whatever you want to call it, on their paycheck to become a certified mental health interventionalist or whatever, who's also a licensed peace officer. I don't know if that's something that New York could think about doing. It seems just kind of mind-blowing that y'all have to go to work into unknown environments and have absolutely zero way to...
Oh, and she froze.
Just what kind of by paramedics or by people who staff the FDNY, or what kind of outcomes or trends are you seeing from that?
You cut out a little bit in the beginning, so just
I'm sorry.
Kind of trends as far as which? It's okay.
Any attrition, it boggles my mind that you have to go to work basically with no way to defend yourself, and I was curious as to, does that lead to excessive staff turnover or attrition or anything like that in the job that you do?
So without going down a complete rabbit hole of the staffing issues that we have, we've always had a retention problem. We are also paid 35% less than the other first responders in the city. For an example, my top pay as a paramedic after 5 years, which is where we cap out, is $62,000 a year. My husband, on the other hand, who is a firefighter, his top pay after 5 years is $115,000. So there is a huge pay gap, and yeah, so there is a huge pay difference, and that's usually what's led our attrition problem and our retention problem. But now with the increase in assault, it's like, well, why I'm not 100% sure if it's gotten worse. I would have to get those numbers, but I know we did have an influx of people leaving after COVID, and there's so many issues within our culture itself that we have. Right, as of right now, we have 75% of our service of 4,500 members under 5 years on the job.
Wow,
which is a huge issue.
That's huge.
Well, Lauren, we are at the end of our second segment, and we're at a big shock, a little bit long. But I do want to thank you for joining us today. It's always interesting to look into the life of the gun rights advocate, trainer, and paramedic into New York City. Again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you guys for having me.
All right, folks, we are going to step aside to break. We're going to hear from ACLDN, and we'll be right back with the news segment right after this.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. If you carry a defensive handgun, you need protection from the aftermath of prosecution. Even if you do everything right, you can be the victim of an overzealous prosecutor or even be falsely accused. That is where the ACLDN comes in. They provide immediate assistance when you need it most. If you find yourself under arrest, they immediately pay bail money and the retainer for your attorney. Additional funds are available for trial and civil proceedings. Beyond the money, they have far and away the best team in the industry, providing you invaluable information and training DVDs that are included with your membership and who stand ready to work with your lawyer on your defense. People like Massad Ayub, John Farnham, James Fleming, Tom Givens, Emmanuel Capelson, Dennis Tueller, and led by network president Marty Hayes. Initial membership is only $135 for your first year, and you get 8 incredible training DVDs and other educational material when you join. If you don't have tens of thousands of dollars to defend yourself at your disposal right now, you need to be a member of the ACLDN. Go to armedcitizensnetwork.org and become a member today. And please mention that you heard about them on the Polite Society podcast.
And welcome back to the Polite Society podcast. This is the news segment, and I should mention, as I do every segment, that we are brought to you by the Second Amendment Foundation. Before we get to the news, I want to get one social media comment that came in during our interview segment, and Charlie Chambers says, "Charlie, I got your hotel stay covered for the Mag 40." So,
is the other Charlie going too?
The other Charlie's already paid. He's going to be here.
All right, he's making this tough.
No pressure, Charlie. No pressure at all, man.
No pressure. Everybody's going but you, Charlie. No pressure.
Right, exactly. All the cool kids are going to be there, Charlie.
All the kids are going. Ugh. All right. I got to start selling fingerprints in New York City.
As opposed to selling your soul.
Well, there's nothing left.
All right.
So,
go ahead.
If I get a portable printer and an electronic reader, and I'm right outside the police station, I'm at one police station, right? I'm doing them right there, right on the property, and I'm only charging $50 in cash with two proofs, two IDs, and it should be fine. It should be good to go. I'm sticking to all of the rules that they want us to abide by.
But you know, Charlie,
what could possibly go wrong?
You're talking New York City at one police plaza there, and gee, do you think New York City might require like licensing, and it might like cost an arm and half your leg?
This is going to be one of those pop-up stores. I'm going to pop in. I'm going to put an ad on Craigslist. Say, listen, I'm going to be down here from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock. Come get your fingerprints. It'll take 7 minutes. We'll be in and out of there. Done.
Very cool. You know, I suppose we should actually like maybe talk a little bit of news. I don't know. Iowa and Tennessee. Iowa, it's been signed. Tennessee, I think they're waiting for the ticker tape parade for the governor, but it's going to happen. Iowa and Tennessee are set to become the 19th and 20th constitutional carry. I don't like that term. I call it permitless carry. If it were constitutional carry, you could carry full auto without getting a background check. They're the 19th and 20th permitless carry states. And I was a little worried about Iowa. She held on to that and was really mum about it. And boom, it happened on Friday.
Yep, it did. And more importantly, they also, well, not more importantly, but almost as important, they got rid of their pistol purchase permit at the same time. I kind of wish the North Carolina General Assembly would be watching what's going on in Iowa, because we still haven't gotten rid of it.
Right. There's still a couple states in play. Louisiana, and Rob isn't here, or I'd give him a little ration of stuff for it. Louisiana's still in play, but they were a leader on gun rights for quite a while.
It may make it to meetings and stuff this time around in Texas. We'll see what happens.
That was the other one I was going to bring up, is that Texas is thinking about it, but I don't know how hard.
You thought about it before, so I'm not holding my breath, but
yeah. I want to get in another comment that came in about the interview, and I think that's going to be a common thread throughout the night. Adriana says, I live in New York City. The amount of illegal guns floods the city, but politicians keep denying the fact that the more controls they put in, the more illegal guns are brought in and brought on the streets. Cuomo is useless. Then DJ Play Nice says, never fear, Iowa came correct. Nebraska will too. Dude, I hope so. Nebraska, you are surrounded by, well, no, you're not surrounded by, Colorado doesn't have it, but other than Colorado, you are surrounded by constitutional carry now. Nebraska needs to come on board. I hope they do. So, and then one that wasn't written in show notes, but I wanted to talk about because, and we teased it in the open, is that Delaware is going the opposite way. Delaware, it's passed the Senate in record time. Standard capacity magazine limit, their ban. They're going to a 17-round magazine is the limit that you can have for any firearm. And they're going to be ushering in pistol purchase permits. And what gets me about Delaware's is, but it's free. All you've got to do is get fingerprinted and get training. Well, just getting fingerprinting, and the training is the exact same training as to get a concealed carry permit. So you're looking at a minimum of a couple $100 of training, and for a very inexpensive handgun, that more than doubles your cost. Because I know there are places where you can buy Sky firearms, for example, or High Points for less than $200 brand new. And just requiring background checks and training, you're guaranteeing to at least double that price.
It's kind of like they're trying to get the worst of New Jersey and Maryland, which which borders Delaware.
Right.
Delaware used to be, it was the home of DuPont, big makers of gunpowder.
Mm-hmm.
They used to have their legislature was great because it had no lawyers in it. It was like the only one in the U.S. that had not one lawyer in the legislature. It's kind of one of these states that's really gone downhill, and I'm not sure why. Because outside of Wilmington, it's a fairly rural state.
It is. Big John.
I can drive down to Delaware and do fingerprints there too.
Yeah,
there you go.
I'm pretty sure Kim Petters will put me up, so we're cool.
Oh, come on! Why will it not populate? Come on, something's wrong. It was not showing up on my screen. I don't know why. Big John 410 says Delaware State Sportsmen's Association is holding a virtual meeting this Tuesday, 4/6 at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. If you're in Delaware, make sure you attend that. If you're not in Delaware, hey, watch me over on the Daily Bullet. Yeah. So, anyway, I'm going to try to, and then Charlie Chambers, try this again. There it starts working. DuPont started in 1803, owned Remington 2. First government contract was with Thomas Jefferson. He supplied gunpowder. Wow, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll get that Big John 410 comment. And what else do we need to talk about in news, folks?
Let's talk about the cities that have slashed the police budgets, because it just kind of fits with the conversation with Lauren. And so the data is what's pretty interesting, is the fact that, and I'm going to read a couple of these. So violent crimes in Minneapolis are up 22% year over year. And Portland's crime numbers are up 340% year over year. This is homicide crimes. New York City is reporting a 40% increase in shootings versus last year. You're hearing the same things from LA, from Austin. And there was some... there were some other numbers that I now don't remember. But so what's happened is any place that they have decided to defund the police or talk about defunding the police, whatever that is, and then bring in social services, bring in social workers, they're finding out that, one, the social workers didn't sign up for this, and two, there are now documented cases of social workers being murdered in the commission of their job. So they're doing their job and someone's attacked them, something's happened where they're stepping in to be a quasi police officer. So this defunding the police is not helping.
I agree with you, Amanda.
John.
Tracy?
The Austin Police Chief Brian Manley has just resigned. He resigned. He issued his resignation or submitted it to the city council within the past month or so. I have a personal friend who retired as a sergeant from the Austin Police Department and moved 2.5 hours away and is now a university police cop because it's safer. Austin just is going to hell in a handbasket, and we're not having police academies graduate. The attrition rate is huge. Police morale is down. And Austin has a horrible mayor who is, I just saw a recent poll of the top 10 worst mayors in the United States, and the old girl in Chicago ranked below Steve Adler, who is the mayor in Austin. And it's bad if the Austin mayor is ranking higher than the mayor of Chicago for bad mayors in the United States.
Wow.
Nothing good is coming from this. Not one thing.
We have something very similar going on in Asheville. A smaller department, but when you lose 55 officers over the course of a year, and it's because of a fairly radical city council, no backup for when the Antifa and BLM have their rallies in downtown. There's a reason that we're called the San Francisco of Appalachia or Austin North. We'll just leave it at that.
Austin North.
All right, we are, once again, we're late. But do we want to talk about anything else in news before we take off? I'm not seeing anybody jumping right on it. So let's do this. We're going to go ahead and we're going to hear from JPFO. And when we come back, we're going to get into our DGU segment where we have not just one, but two home invasions we need to discuss. And we'll get to that right after this.
In 1928, Germany required its citizens to register their firearms, making possible Hitler's 1938 Nazi Weapons Act, disarming all Jews. Now ask yourself, what is the real consequence of registration? All in favor of gun control, raise your right hand. Brought to you by Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership, America's aggressive civil rights organization. JPFO.org.
And welcome back to the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. These discussions are not legal advice. Some of us are trainers, but this is not formal training, and you need formal training. The Defensive Gun Use segment is intended as information, not as training. As always, the opinions of the hosts are only their own opinions and not those of any sponsors or other affiliations. Tracy, it looks like you signed up for the first one.
Our first story comes to us out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Recently at 1:15 a.m., the police received a 911 call from a man who reported that he had shot some people who attacked him in his apartment. Multiple people in the home... Pardon me while I lost my place. Multiple people in the home reported to police that a couple had come to the apartment earlier, but when they got into an argument, the man left. The shooter reported that the man had jumped from the balcony, injuring his leg. He went to find the man and to get him to the hospital, but instead an argument ensued and was told, "I will see you again." Later, there was a knock on the door, and the same man and 3 others rushed in. He put the resident in a chokehold as the other battered him with fists and a baton. The resident was able to get free of his attackers and retrieve his gun from his bedroom. The men resumed their physical attack before the residents opened fire. In the end, the man who had left the apartment earlier in the day was found at the scene with multiple lead injections and died at the scene. His brother was with him, and the friends were found in the streets with wounds. Both were taken to the hospital with gunshot wounds. The stepfather showed up at the hospital later with bullet holes of his own in his buttocks. They found the shooter inside with his family and several small children. The gun was on the kitchen table, and shell casings were scattered around the floor. The stepfather told the police that his stepson had called him saying that he had been beaten up and to come pick him up. He then picked up his other stepson, the friend, and a woman to go, quote-unquote, retaliate. The shooter's girlfriend told the police that after the shooting, he began crying, saying that he was sorry, but that he had to protect himself and his family, and then vomited. Police are treating this as a justifiable homicide. They are charging the surviving attackers with aggravated burglary, aggravated battery with great bodily harm, and conspiracy.
I'm going to jump in on this first, and Tracy, I'm pretty sure you can back me up on this from all the training you've had. I've never been through an incident where I've had to discharge my firearm in defense, but I've heard about several. And becoming emotionally a basket case, shall we say, and vomiting is not outside of normal actions. That is something that really you should have in your mind. If you have to use your gun in self-defense, that could very well happen to you.
That is what I have heard from my training. I do not know from first-hand account, fortunately.
Yeah, me as well. Thank goodness I don't. And the other thing about this one, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it might have been, it was good that the guy had a gun. It would have been better if the guy would have had his gun on his body, other than, instead of having to go retrieve it. But,
Not everybody lives by Pogo.
No.
They should, but they don't.
In this case was also a good example of the disparity of force. You had 4 against 1, plus they also had a baton, so, blunt object. And it was certainly a life or death situation for this guy. And maybe his family.
Well, and let's talk about marksmanship. 4 attackers got shot. That's doing it good.
I remember talking to somebody. Go ahead, Charlie.
I was going to say, I hate to bring this up, but as the only person on the group here that lives in occupied territory, I always tell students that the reason they want to get a Glock and get a high cap magazine, spend $125 on a 27-year-old magazine, is because bad guys have friends. Mm-hmm. And I would love to have a 17-round magazine from Delaware, but bad guys have friends. 4 people broke into the house, and if you have, I call it the Joe Biden special, the double-barrel shotgun, just fire it into the air. That's not going to suffice. You're in the house, there's 4 bad guys, you've got the Joe Biden special, you fire 2 shots into the air, and now they beat you with your own gun. It becomes a bludgeoning tool. So it's good to hear the reinforcement that bad guys have friends, and this is why we need high-cap magazines.
Yeah, the only time you want to double is when it's a double rifle with a 450 Nitro Express and it's charging Cape Buffalo.
Right. Probably not a lot of those.
I've been reading a lot of Safari stuff.
You know,
No,
maybe if it's a 450 Nitro Express and you can get them all to line up in a nice, even line.
Yeah, one shot, one kill, right? Yeah.
Then have to check the rifling on that barrel.
On.
I'm telling you. All right, John, you got our next one out of what? Puyallup? Wow.
Puyallup, Washington. We have found over the course of time that the vast majority of home invasions or burglaries are committed by more than one person. 3 armed invaders entered an apartment intending to, quote, commit burglary or home invasion robbery, close quote, according to the Puyallup police. It was 10:50 in the evening when the trio entered the residence and found a 19-year-old who was also armed. The resident fired multiple shots in the direction of the intruders. He was able to strike 2 of the intruders. All 3 made their exit from the home. Officers arrived to find 2 individuals shot and reports of individuals and vehicles fleeing the area. The 2 shot intruders were found some distance from each other. They were taken to a trauma center in serious condition. They did not say if the third person was in custody or not. Investigators believe the incident is not random. The tenant's self-defense claim is being evaluated to ensure it falls within state law once criminal charges are filed against the other 3. He is cooperating with the investigation.
All right, on this one, I'm gonna steal
questions. I've got questions.
Yes, I'm gonna steal Rob's. I'm gonna steal Rob's tagline here. I wonder what toxicology is going to come up with, not just for the invaders. This one looks like, it was a home invasion, and it's good we carried it, but I think there's more to this story.
I think you're saying a home
with the
business.
Investigation. Home business.
I think he's running a home business.
What was he armed with? He was 19 years old.
Yes.
It would be against the law to, be sitting there with his loaded high-capacity Glock versus a long gun. But, dude is cooperating with the investigation. So
no, let's talk about that for a second. He's not allowed to own the gun. But I do
or buy the ammunition for the gun.
Right, but I do believe that he's allowed to
possess it.
Use the gun.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's right. Okay.
It's
but you're giving him the benefit of the doubt that this is not a
home
drug
business.
Involved crime. Yes, a home business.
The
gun could be, you know what? He could be living in his dad's basement, okay? For all we know.
Yes.
And it could be his dad's handgun.
Okay. Yeah.
So, there's a lot of things we don't know that are speculation at this point. But,
Christina Maria says we have a 10-round limit here. Unfortunately, New York, ouch.
But this is in Washington, so what's the limit in Washington?
I think they can have standard capacity. I don't think there is a limit. But
the thing that concerns me is the incident was not random, which tells me that like Amanda said, they had a home business. These guys probably knew each other.
Absolutely, Charlie. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or they were coming to collect a debt.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Of one variety or another.
Exactly. To me, it's interesting. There were a couple stories in my little neck of the woods a couple years ago about some family that was broken into and tied up and beaten, and I can't remember if they were killed or the house was set on fire or something. But it's interesting that the phrase they use is it was not a random act, and to me, it's like why don't you just say they were they owed them some money or they owed them some drugs or something. Because you read these stories, you're like, oh my gosh.
They don't want to share all that, but they just want to tell you, the neighbor, that you need not be fearful because crime's coming to your community.
Right, and to me, that's a way for them to play a little Jedi mind trick and say, "Well, listen, we live in a nice area, except that, this little incident that happened was, it wasn't random. They knew each other. You're like, oh, shit.
Support your locally owned small business. Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
DJ Play Nice says total speculation.
Yep. He's
DJ,
right.
Oh, absolutely.
You're kind of new here. Yeah, that's what we do in the DGU segment. Yeah.
Now,
exactly.
I could say that it wasn't random because I remember one we had a few years ago where these people were targeted. They were elderly and somebody had cancer. Therefore, they had heavy-duty narcotics.
Mm-hmm.
So, in that case, it wasn't random. And yes, they were after drugs, but these people had it legally.
But this dude is 19 years old. Okay, 19 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe he has
scenario a little bit.
The heartbreak of psoriasis or something.
Maybe. Maybe.
Sure.
Inquiring line.
All right. Let's go ahead and we're going to go end this one right on time. We're going to go ahead and set aside the DGU segment. When we come back, we're going to be talking about, well, we used to call it the blog post segment, but we do a lot more than blogging now. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to step aside. When we come back, we'll talk about what we've all been doing, and then we'll shut the show down. We'll be back right after this.
In 1928, Germany required its citizens to register their firearms, making possible Hitler's 1938 Nazi Weapons Act, disarming all Jews. Now ask yourself, what is the real consequence of registration? All in favor of gun control, raise your right hand. Brought to you by Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership, America's aggressive civil rights organization. jpfo.org.
And welcome back to the final segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. Normally I would again say a pithy comment and throw it to Rob, who isn't here, but instead I'm just going to ask you to go ahead and read his blog whenever you get the chance at slowfacts.wordpress.com, and I'll give him 2 pithy comments if he's here next week. John, what's been up over at your blog, Only Guns and Money?
Well, with Iowa, which we already discussed a little bit, with Iowa passing constitutional carry and getting rid of their pistol purchase permit, I posted another in the series of Every Picture Tells a Story. With 19 states now having constitutional or permitless carry, the population of the U.S. that isn't required to have a permit is now at about 15%. Unfortunately, this growth isn't coming from the, shall we say, unfree states. While good, it is free or shall issue states going even further, and not the may issue states. Those states seem to be, for lack of a better word, static, if they're not actually regressing, kind of like Delaware. So that and more is at onlygunsandmoney.com.
All right, let me skip back over to show notes. Amanda, what's been going on at Eye on the Target Radio, as if I don't know, and what's coming up?
Well, we had a really interesting guest last night, and a very good show. We brought Paul onto the show so that our radio listeners got a chance to interact and to hear Paul. So it was a really good show. And what we've got coming up on the 18th is I've got Marjorie Taylor Greene coming on talking about her Second Amendment initiatives onto the radio show. So I'm pretty excited about that. I have somebody scheduled for next week, but the calendar's not in front of me, and they're not stuck in my head like Marjorie Taylor Greene is. So whoever you are, I'm sorry. I apologize. Right?
I could totally... I can't tell you who's on the Daily Bullet with me tomorrow, other than I know I've got somebody scheduled. I absolutely relate to that. Charlie, you kind of teased it a little bit, but tell us about riding shotgun with Charlie, what's happening, and what's coming up.
All right. Well, the teaching side of me, I've had a spike in people interested in taking classes, and particularly the Utah class, which is really good. the writing shotgun stuff, I have been, for a week and a half, I filmed 10 shows in 5 days on 2 coasts. And that's given me a lot of work to do as far as editing. So for the next 3 months or so, I'm doing my best to put out a show every week. And that's pretty exciting. And one of the shows I'm going to be putting out is my 100. And as we said, my passenger of the show is Alan Gottlieb, and I get to drive his very expensive Corvette around Bellevue, Washington. And this is really cool, too. Derek LeBlanc from Kid Safe Foundation was with me. He followed me, and I have some video from Derek's truck of me driving Alan's car around Bellevue, Washington. So that's a little extra fun B-roll. And tomorrow...
Please tell me that as you are being filmed from the back, you got Alan in the Corvette, you greased it a little bit and broke the back end loose.
I wish.
He drove like a girl.
It was a lot cool, let's face it. There were a couple times there was a lot of traffic in Bellevue, you know what I'm saying? So it wasn't too much area to put the test, to part of the test. So, but it was really cool. If you could afford a Corvette, I would strongly encourage it. And tomorrow, the show that I'm putting out is the Florida Carry episode 99 part 2. I've got Kevin and Sarah Sona. I've got Christy Frankie from Packing Meat, and Steven Shivers, who was the host at Runaway Campers of the Florida Carry event. So that was a little bit of editing insanity because I had 3 different videos to edit. But I think it looks pretty cool, and that's going to be coming out tomorrow.
DJ Play Nice says, missed opportunity, Charlie.
I know, right? I still want Alan to like me. You know what I mean?
There is that.
So it's one of these things.
It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, Charlie.
All right, that's a good point. That is a good point. Tracy, how about you?
You don't generally write, Tracy.
I haven't been doing anything. I've been getting more tattoos and playing with dogs and hanging out with my friends at TACCon, and that's it. I'm going to shoot 2 classes in April with Tom Gibbons at KR Training, 2 one-day classes. I'm going to shoot a historical handgun class, and Tom Gibbons is going to lecture in the morning, and then Carl Wren will be running us through historical police and military qualifications from 1900s through modern day. And then I'm going to be taking another class, a one-day class with Tom Gibbons of defensive revolver stuff. And if I could find somebody that has a left-handed K-frame holster, I would shoot the defensive revolver class left-handed. But I am coming up with a big zilch on that, so I'm probably just going to shoot Model 66 and shoot it strong side. But other than that, I'm not teaching anything. Not a lot going on. It's getting ready to get hot in Texas. So that's my boring life.
Well, on my media end, other than what I do here, I wrote about Tennessee. I wrote about Delaware. I wrote about Iowa. Those are all up at thegunmag.com. But what I'd really encourage you to do is just join me daily, 5 p.m. Central Time, the only time zone that matters, right, Tracy? And
absolutely. And come register for the Mag 40 at Paul's. And you can find more information about that at www.masadayougroup.com. Or you can email Susan at politicsandguns.com, or you can reach out to me in cyberspace, and someone can answer all of your questions about the Mag 40 and help you get registered to come hang out with all the cool kids in South Dakota in June.
I love that face, Charlie. All right, that does wrap up another episode of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. I'd like to thank Lauren Hartnett for joining us today. So for Amy, Dana, Gary, Tracy, John, Susan, Amanda, Robin, Charlie, and Rob.
Until the next time.
Stay safe.
Be aware.
And we'll see you down the road.
The views and opinions on the show you just heard are those of the host and the guest and are not necessarily the views of any sponsors or other affiliations. But hey, not everyone is as smart as we are.
Okay, we are clear of recording. I'm going to shut the stream down right after I get two more comments in, both of them by DJ Play Nice. He says, Tacts and Dogs and Guns YouTube channel coming soon. I think that's Tracy. And he also commented, and a partridge in a pear.
See, that's the thing. I'm not on often much anymore, but you never know what's going to come out of my mouth. So it's always, I'm always entertaining. So if nothing else.
All right. Folks, I am going to shut down the streams. Thank you, sir, for watching. And remember, come join me tomorrow, 5 p.m. Central Time, for the Daily Bullet. I'll have somebody joining me, and we'll be talking about the news of the